Welcome to Cinemaphile, where we showcase the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers and talk to them about their work. I'm your host, Mike Kaspar. You can listen to other interviews by going to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar at Spotify. Meredith Monk, composer, performer, and interdisciplinary artist, is one of the great artistic pioneers of our time. Yet her profound cultural influence is largely unrecognized. With Monk's music at its center, featuring interviews with Bjork and David Byrne, Monk in Pieces is a mosaic that mirrors the structure of Monk's own work and illuminates her wildly original vocabulary of sound and imagery. As a female artist in the male-dominated downtown art scene of New York in the 1960s and 1970s, Monk had to fight for recognition and resources. What a wonderful documentary film this is about an artist who, frankly, I did not know anything about and now do. And I can tell you, you will truly appreciate her as an artist and as a person, her perseverance. And there's so much more to recommend about Monk in Pieces. We're joined today by the director, Billy Shebar.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to be here. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about your own introduction into the world of Meredith Monk.
So it goes back to 1990 when Meredith cast my wife, Katie Geisinger, in the original cast of Atlas, which is now kind of looked back on as her masterpiece. And I had never heard her music before, like you. And then Katie started bringing home these sort of fragments that Meredith was working with, and they were just so intriguing. Basically, from that moment on, Atlas was an extraordinary production. And Katie's been like in every major Meredith Monk piece since. She still works with Meredith. So I've had this incredible front row seat. Just my love of Meredith's music has really deepened. It really strikes something primal in me. I've always loved it. But I've also gotten to know Meredith as a result over the years and realized that she would be a really fascinating subject for a film because she really had so many obstacles thrown in her path, especially as a female composer in this very kind of male world of the downtown art scene of the 60s and 70s. Just what it took her to kind of stick to this very unique vision and just stick to it in the face of criticism. I mean, the critics really misunderstood her for decades before they came around and said some of the most crazy stuff you could imagine in the early years.
I got to tell you, one of those reviews just really made me laugh, which is the one from the New York Times.
No, I had a ball like mining, going through those old scans of New York Times reviews from the 60s and 70s, and that was probably the gem. It gets a laugh every time. Made my cats bite each other. To think that a reviewer would actually write that in a New York Times review is kind of beyond belief.
But, those revenge is sweet, if you will. I don't think that Meredith, in a personal level, would say that out loud. But in terms of her artistic achievements over the years, I think it's nice to see her vindicated, at least on that level. Here she is. We're talking about the late 70s, early 80s when she comes onto the scene.
I mean, even earlier, she really came to New York in the late 60s
Okay.
and was part of the whole like happenings. And I think she worked with some of the Fluxus people on their stuff. And then she just started to realize, oh, I need to be on my own and figure out my own approach. And that really happened in the 60s where she started making these discoveries about her voice. So,
Yeah, that's it. That's an important part. She's discovering her voice and has
yeah.
the courage as an artist to push that forward in terms of the way that she wanted to approach the art she wanted to create. Pretty brave.
She's really tough and really single-minded, but of course supremely talented and talented in not just composing and singing. I mean, she's like a first-class filmmaker, installation artist, theater director. I mean, that's very, very rare that somebody can be as good as she is at 5 or 6 different art forms and use them all in her work.
I love the way the film essentially begins with her in her apartment. We get the tour from many years ago of her apartment. Almost from the beginning of the film, we see her as a person, vulnerable, self-effacing in some ways, but just we get to we get to meet her right away in terms of in a less guarded way,
Yeah.
if you will. And then we are introduced into her work and the rest of it. Um, Out of curiosity, was she all in? Was there some hesitancy on her part? What was sort of the for you to gain her trust over the course of making this film? What was that like for you and for her?
Well, it really helped that we had this 30-year plus relationship to begin with because of my wife, Katie. I mean, when our son was born, we were taking him before he was 1 years old. He was going on tour with her, and I was pushing him in a stroller on the streets of Macedonia where they happened to have a concert for some reason. So that was built-in level of trust, which was it made it, much easier. But even with that, I mean, you have to really, as you know from your interviewing filmmakers and so on. I mean, to be the subject of a documentary is a huge leap of faith. I mean, it's just very, very vulnerable. And I want, and so there was certainly a dance with her about, what are we going to do? What can we film? What can't we film? And we kind of, the scenes that you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned them, these sort of very contemplative or intimate scenes in her loft of her just going about her daily life, those turned out to be really great because they were something she was very comfortable with doing in front of the camera. And they really worked well. I mean, I had shot some of them when I finally brought on an editor to work with me. I had been editing it myself or piecemeal with some other editors up until a point that I kind of hit a roadblock. And then I brought in a wonderful editor named Sabina Krayenbuhl, who said, you need to go back to her loft, shoot more of those scenes, and we'll thread them throughout the film. And they'll become like this sort of ballast against all these very kinetic, out there kinds of performance scenes.
Yeah, and I think that's important because, especially for someone like me who wasn't familiar with her work, it takes a minute to kind of get used to what she's doing and why she's doing it and how she's doing it. But as the film goes on, it becomes increasingly more apparent to me, and I think it will to people watching the film. It kind of becomes a you go girl thing for me. Like, thank God you did what you did. Thank God you took the chances that you did because now I get it.
Exactly. One of my favorite interviews in the film is with her former partner from the 80s, Ping Chong. He put it really well. I think he sort of said, if you just keep it going and stick to it long enough, eventually they have to grudgingly, acknowledge your contribution. And that is really what happened. There's also a very funny moment in the interview that I wasn't able to include in the film, but I did get it into the trailer where Meredith told me that, when she was getting all those really nasty, like sexist reviews in the 60s and 70s, at one point she said she thought she wrote to one of these guys and said to him, I'm going to live longer than you. And I thought that was really, that captures her toughness and her ability, her defending this unique vision that she had, all the way to the point where finally, yeah, they grudgingly recognized her and big time, she got the Presidential Medal of the Arts, and so many artists like Bjork and David Byrne acknowledge her inspiration.
Yeah, that's a great part of it. And even within the film, because you do show the scathing reviews at the beginning of her career, and then there's a point in the film where you keep bringing back kind of reviews of the New York critics who are seeing your shows, and there's a moment in one of the reviews that we see in the film that says, I don't know that I like this, but there's certainly moments of brilliance. There's something like it was like a moment of clarity for this particular critic was couldn't quite let go of the part that they didn't like, but goes, but you know what? This is really something quite special, right? Isn't that, is that?
Absolutely. I love that review because it is a kind of turning point, the way that we kind of shape that narrative of the critical
Yeah,
response.
yeah.
That was perfect to put in kind of around the middle where the guy goes, it's really terrible, but there's so many remarkable moments here that one is almost inclined to pronounce the evening a success after all. That's, I believe, what the quote was. It's such a kind of backhanded, compliment in the end, but it was great. Yeah.
Well, I don't know that I've done a very good job of describing the kind of art that she creates as a vocalist, as an artist, as a musician, as you said, a visual performer. Let's kind of give some broad outlines or parameters to how you would describe the way that she is as an artist.
Well, she's truly, what the proper term I guess would be, interdisciplinary. She really, in an arts world that's increasingly specialized, especially if you're a performer, it's like, well, what are you? Are you an opera singer or are you a jazz singer? I mean, my wife Katie went through that constantly until she found Meredith, who could actually use all of her talents. So that was, I think that's a key to Meredith, is this sort of interdisciplinary nature of her work. And I would also say that, her works are non they're non-linear, or they're maybe even you'd say non-narrative, or they're really mosaic. That's the structure she prefers in her theater works, in her films, and that actually inspired me to construct the film that way. I did not try to do a traditional biopic. For that reason, I really wanted the challenge of something told in pieces. And it really gave me the freedom to kind of pick and choose which songs I used, which visual material I used, how did I put them together? And that was a thrill. But I would say that, yeah, interdisciplinary, and the other thing we already talked about at the core of her is just the discoveries that she made about the voice and all the ways you can be expressive with the human voice without using words. That is, I would say, the essential thing to know about Meredith Monk. The most important thing she contributed in some ways is she did this incredible exploration and mining of her own voice and realized that she could, express the most profound emotions without using words. More profound, that words sometimes get in the way of expressing emotions. So she just worked and worked and worked on her own voice to develop this unique vocabulary of the voice, that uses no words. I mean, I think VJ Iyer was one of the academics that we interviewed. Said, he called them elemental sonic gestures. They're very hard to write down. I think the musicologists have a term for what she does, which is extended vocal technique. That she's a pioneer of that. It's using the voice in ways that no trained opera singer would ever think of doing. Yeah.
And to my ears and to my mind, there's another element to this, which is there's something primal, there's something unknowable. It's sort of the beginning of the human experience when they looked up to the stars and couldn't explain it. There was something that they connected to and they were trying to express it. I would imagine that would have been the kind of the sequence of the consciousness of human beings. And it feels like she takes us back to those thoughts, those moments, if you will. Is that fair?
That's a great observation. In fact, it echoes what Bjork has said about her, that her music is a gateway to the ancients and the ancient sounds. Meredith herself says in one of the interviews in the film, the voice is the first instrument. It's the first human instrument. So it transcends language and all the filters that language put up when you're trying to express yourself. So primal is a very good word. I think I was conscious about doling out the moments that are the most primal when I felt people would be kind of ready for them. And I think the most primal piece, in my opinion, of all, and one of my absolute favorite of her work, is called Do You Be? And it really just sounds like a cry to heaven. And when we put that in the last scene, basically over her eating breakfast alone in her apartment, and then that music starts, and it just felt so right, and it felt right to be kind of the climax or the end of the piece.
Yeah, just to follow up on what I was saying, before language, this is art and music before language. Because at
Yeah.
some point we had to make decisions about what the string of letters meant in relation to the real world, right? Before
Yeah.
there were words, there were sounds that people made to express what they wanted or needed, or their anger, or their love for one another, before there were words to express that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what babies do. They communicate without words.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and what's so remarkable, again, what's remarkable about Meredith Monk's work is that you are seeing and hearing it in real time, just what I just described, which is the ability to convey emotion, expressions of, I said, love and anger and all kinds of things today, listening to her music.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I guess the other part I'm trying to get to is that we can imagine that experience as early humans, but we can also imagine it as modern, sophisticated, educated people as well. So
Yeah.
it's something special. I'll say this for the audience. If you get a chance, you really should do yourself a favor and check out the music of Meredith Monk. And why not start with this wonderful documentary called Monk in Pieces? Because it is a wonderful film.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we're opening August 1st at the Lemley Theater, and it is you really at least you get to hear all of my mo favorite musical pieces of Meredith. I think in the end, I think you actually get like 40 pieces of Meredith's music throughout because it's really led by the music, and the music is almost always there. We just the only places where we don't use it are most of the sort of those quiet, intimate, scenes of her doing her, going about her business every day in her loft. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you speak at length with people that have worked with her over the years, which is really illuminating and wonderful. And you hear their perspective, you hear what it was like to work with her, how she could be demanding because this was so near and dear to her, what she did. I imagine for any artist who's creating something that's not completely unheard of, but certainly not on the level that she brought this art to before, to want to have it presented in the way that she hears it, the way that she's imagining it to be. So in that regard, who could blame anyone for not wanting it done the way that she has worked so hard to make it?
And there's a very poignant, moment that we were able to capture after 60 years of not only directing, composing, and performing in her, her own work. She's actually handing off her masterpiece, Atlas, to another director and another young performer who's going to actually do the role that she did in the original production. And it's just you can really feel just how hard it is for her to let go in that scene. And she does, there's a scene in the kitchen with this director where she's going, it's very few people really get this, and don't I want it to be all your production, but don't mess it up. I mean, she doesn't say that, but
Yeah.
it is, you can really feel the angst about handing off as you might, it's completely natural that she would,
Oh,
because like I say,
absolutely.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's good. I mean, you feel like I felt anyway, I really got to know Meredith and on a lot of different levels. And even within that scene, when she's guiding that vocalist through this particularly, I assume, key part of the play, of the piece, you could see that. You just what you described, like how particular she was that this vocalist got it right.
Yeah, and I actually saw that production, and that's Joanna Lynn Jacobs, and she did an incredible
Oh,
job. I mean, in a certain sense, nobody's gonna do it exactly the way
yeah,
Meredith does. The most important thing, as Meredith says, is that you make it your own and capture the spirit of it. And I
yeah.
thought Joanna completely did that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it
yeah,
was terrific. And
yeah.
again, this is no small feat. These vocals are really difficult in the sense of to get them right. But that's so important to what the art is about that it's understandable that you want to do it the right way and make sure you make every effort to make that happen. It's Monk in Pieces will be opening on Friday, July 25th at the IFC Center, and then opening here in Los Angeles at the Lemley Royal on August 1st. See this film, people. If you're listening to the sound of our conversation, Monk in Pieces. It's being released to Zeitgeist, I believe, is the distributor. And whether you're in New York or Los Angeles or in some other place in the country where it plays, seek it out. Monk in Pieces. If not, be looking for it when you have an opportunity to check it out online. Will probably be like me, someone who did not know about Meredith Monk, and you will come away not only appreciating her work, but a fan. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have been talking with the director of Monk in Pieces, and that would be Billy Shebar. Billy, thank you so very much for your time today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, And you can listen to previous interviews as well as special programming, or you can subscribe by going to Cinemaphile, that's F-I-L-E, with Mike Kaspar, at Spotify. Until next time, thank you for listening.